During an indoor renovation, two installers crowd onto one stepladder beneath a ceiling light, and the overloaded frame starts losing control. Extra weight and movement on equipment built for one can destroy the ladder's center of gravity. Stepladders rely on precise structural limits to remain upright. At a busy extraction site, a shortcut across a large floor opening turned unsafe when an unsecured tailgate shifted away from the crossing. Vehicle cargo doors secure loads. They are not a walking support across open gaps. High above a snowy work area, a suspended metal step frame takes extra load as its anchors begin to give way without warning. Suspended metal steps rely entirely on secure anchor points, stable connections, and verified load limits. A busy bottling plant turns routine pallet handling into a conveyor zone concern when an unexpected loss of footing brings a worker too close to a moving mechanical gap. Approaching active machinery to manually adjust loads can expose you to unpredictable shifts and hidden floor gaps. At a trench side lift, a crane holds a concrete slab over soft ground as the entire setup shifts toward a critical failure. Riding a suspended load creates a hidden exposure point. Machinery lifting heavy materials holds immense tension, and soft trench edges can lose support without much warning. When the suspended load loses stability, the sudden shock can break the soil's strength and pull the setup downward. Keep the trench edge clear until the load is fully grounded and stable. Heavy blocks should be guided from a distance with tag lines, not from beneath the lift path. The safest position is always outside the shadow of suspended weight. On an active city street, a casual walk becomes risky when a garbage truck moves forward while the front blind area is occupied. Commercial vehicle cabins sit high above the road, leaving a hidden area in front of the bumper. When that space is occupied, the driver may have no clear view through the windshield or mirrors. If the truck begins moving, the vehicle continues along its travel path before the front area can be fully verified. The risk comes from blind spots, cab height, and short reaction windows around heavy transport. The front of a running transport vehicle needs the same caution as an active travel lane. Wait for large vehicles to pass before crossing nearby. On a busy street, a rider attempts to steer his motorcycle around a massive open pit in the middle of the road, misjudges the gap, and loses control. Two-wheeled vehicles depend on stable ground, predictable steering, and enough clearance to keep both tires aligned. When a large open pit cuts into the road path, the remaining space becomes a narrow balance challenge. A small misjudgment in spacing can move the tire path toward loose edges, uneven pavement, or broken ground. The safer choice is to avoid tight clearance beside deep road openings. Slow down early, create a wider route, and never force a heavy two-wheeled vehicle through a path that does not give stable tire room. On this roadside, walking past a loaded flatbed truck becomes a serious hazard when unsecured cargo shifts outward into the walking path. Walking through the immediate fall zone of loaded transport vehicles exposes you to sudden material movement. Cargo shifts unseen during rough transit, quickly turning stable stacks into major struck-by risks. When primary restraints fail, heavy, dense material can release in seconds. At a busy loading dock, workers stand on a truck tailgate when the platform suddenly begins to fold upward. Automated mechanical platforms carry immense closing force. When unexpected failures trigger the folding sequence, the solid steel wall can sweep upward at rapid speed. Manual force cannot resist this kind of powered movement. The tight space quickly shrinks, turning a flat standing surface into a closing mechanical gap. Once the sequence begins, the folding path can create extreme pressure against the rigid vehicle body. Powered platforms need confirmed controls, lockouts, and backup stops before anyone uses them as a work surface. In a transport yard, a quick phone setup near a flatbed tire becomes unsafe when an unsecured metal coil begins moving from the truck. Large cylindrical loads store major movement potential when they rest on raised flat surfaces without restraints. Their round shape means once balance is lost, gravity can take over quickly. Without chocks, chains, or restraints, the coil can roll off the edge with momentum, turning the area beside the truck into an uncontrolled material path. Close setup near unstrapped cargo leaves little clearance once movement begins. Unsecured round materials can shift the moment the balance changes. That is why clear boundaries must be set around unstrapped cargo. The load should be secured first, and phones, tools, and traffic should stay away. At an industrial demolition site, an excavator chips away at the base of a large concrete silo as the structure begins losing support. Tall concrete structures carry enormous weight through their lower foundation. Once the base is weakened, the upper mass no longer has a balanced support path. A small lean can rapidly become a full directional collapse when the remaining concrete can no longer resist the weight above it. The hazard is not just the fall itself. It is the uncertainty of direction when the base is removed without controlled sequencing. Demolition must follow an engineered plan. The collapse path, machine position, exclusion boundary, and structural weakening sequence must all be controlled before the first section is removed. An open street excavation leaves almost no margin for error as a motorcycle tries to pass along the narrow edge and loses balance near the road gap. Trying to ride along the narrow edge of an open pavement void exposes you to sudden instability. Loose dirt gives way under tire pressure, pulling the bike off balance. Navigating too close to the drop transforms a minor wobble into a major loss of control hazard. Urban contractors must firmly install rigid blockades to physically separate traffic from deep drops. City inspectors should mandate bright reflectors to warn approaching vehicles early. Every commuter needs to completely avoid these narrow, unpaved edges. In a warehouse alley, one forklift raises another toward a high window, creating a shaky tower no job should ever rely on. Stacking heavy machinery to extend reach creates a highly unstable tower. Equipment is built to stay anchored on solid ground. Lifting one vehicle with another removes that stable base and makes the entire setup depend on a narrow balance point. A slight shift in the top load can break this delicate equilibrium. Gravity then takes over quickly, sending equipment and materials downward. When the task is high, the access method must be designed for height. Use proper lifts, platforms, or scaffolding instead of stacking machines into a temporary tower. Inside a factory floor, a resting net tied to heavy storage cabinets seems harmless until added weight pulls the frame out of balance. Tall, freestanding storage units hold weight vertically. They are not built to resist sideways pulling forces. When a net or hammock is tied to an unsecured cabinet, the pull changes the stress direction through the frame. Added weight draws the center of gravity outward, and the cabinet can lose balance as one connected structure. Tall storage units need anchoring before they resist pulling forces. Resting nets, ropes, or improvised seating should only attach to rated supports. Use proper seating and keep freestanding cabinets for storage. Inside a motorcycle shop, a tall, unsecured metal bar stands upright near the entrance before its narrow balance point begins to shift. A heavy metal bar may look stable while it is standing still, but upright storage creates a fragile center of gravity. The taller the object, the easier it is for a small vibration, slight contact, or uneven floor surface to disturb its balance. Once the center of gravity moves outside the base contact point, gravity takes over and the object accelerates downward. The safer approach is to properly secure loose equipment. Tall tools, bars, pipes, and solid metal objects should be laid flat, racked securely or restrained with brackets so they cannot tip into the active workspace. Besides an open rural path, bracing a tall ladder for an elevated worker becomes a serious safety concern when a swerving motorcycle reaches the ladder support and knocks the elevated worker off balance. Placing temporary climbing frames near active transit routes exposes elevated individuals to unpredictable contact from nearby vehicles. Speeding vehicles can lose traction on loose dirt surfaces. An accidental slip sends heavy machines directly into fragile supports. This collision removes base stability in a second, causing the overhead worker to lose support. Site coordinators must erect rigid blockades to heavily shield vulnerable work zones from incoming traffic. Area monitors need to physically redirect riders far away from elevated tasks. Climbers must tightly anchor to solid structures. In a quiet parking lot, an extension ladder rests against a narrow light pole, making every step depend on fragile friction. Resting ladders against narrow surfaces creates a dangerous balancing act. Rails need a wide, stable surface to distribute pressure evenly. When a tiny contact point supports the full setup, even minimal movement can break the friction holding the ladder in place. Gravity then takes control, forcing the metal to slide sideways without warning. A rounded pole cannot provide the same grip as a flat, stable surface. Secure the ladder with the correct attachment system before climbing, and test both the base and top contact points. Balance should never be the only thing holding the job together. At a construction foundation site, a concrete pour becomes unsafe when a pump boom loses support and moves across the operating area. Concrete pump booms are long hydraulic arms carrying pipe, pressure, and dense material. When a support point or mechanical part releases, the arm can travel across a wide radius. Because the boom is long, a small issue creates larger movement at the far end. Keeping the full reach clear and separated from ground activity is the safest control during the pour. Extended hydraulic equipment needs clearance around its reach. The area beneath and beside the boom should stay open while the system runs. Mark the movement path, stay aware, and maintain distance from pressurized sections. Behind an open delivery truck, a heavy flat load is handed down as gravity begins to overpower the manual transfer. Large flat materials become difficult to control when they tilt downward from a truck bed. The weight shifts away from the support point, and gravity begins pulling the load into a steeper angle. Manual handling becomes unreliable because the force increases faster than the position can be corrected. Once the material tips past its stable point, it can move as one uncontrolled mass, creating a hazardous path beneath and around the unloading area. Heavy materials should not depend on grip strength or improvised positioning. Use mechanical lifting support, team planning, stable staging, and controlled lowering equipment. A factory lifting area turns hazardous when a heavy coil slips from its rigging and moves downward into the danger zone. Suspending immense weight above active spaces directly exposes everyone to major struck-by risks. Connections can fail instantly, transforming a routine lift into an unexpected falling load hazard. When straps slip, the load can shift unexpectedly. This rapid movement creates a large exclusion zone, leaving anyone nearby with very little time to safely move away. Lifting controllers must perfectly secure every connection before elevating heavy cargo. Zone directors need to enforce wide, empty spaces directly beneath the overhead flight path. Every single bystander has to stay far away until the object firmly touches the solid ground. In an industrial yard, an unsecured pickup begins rolling toward a gate, turning a parked vehicle into a moving hazard. Leaving a vehicle without firmly locking the parking brake creates an unpredictable rolling event. Heavy machinery carries enough weight to overcome a slight incline very quickly. When a truck rolls freely, open doors can become solid closing points against gates, walls, or equipment. Reaching into a moving cabin places the access area directly inside the vehicle's travel path. Before stepping away, confirm the vehicle is truly secured, brakes set, wheels controlled, and movement stopped. Once a vehicle starts rolling, the safe choice is distance, not recovery. Equipment can be replaced. The path of motion must be cleared immediately. Outside a street workshop, an open flame reaches a used metal barrel as hidden vapors build into a sudden pressure release. Empty metal containers are not always safe, simply because the visible liquid is gone. Residual vapor can remain trapped inside seams, corners, and closed spaces. When flame or heat reaches that vapor, pressure can build rapidly against the rigid container walls. If the container cannot vent safely, the internal force may release suddenly through weak points, sending the metal casing and contents into uncontrolled motion. Used barrels, tanks, and sealed containers must be kept away from ignition sources until they are cleaned, vented, and verified. The safest approach is to regard every closed container as a possible vapor space until testing confirms otherwise. A quiet storage dock shows how quickly an unsecured stack can shift when thin boards begin sliding off a manual jack during movement. Moving loose, stacked materials without tight binding exposes the load to sudden shifts. Smooth surfaces easily glide against each other when pulled. A slight momentum change quickly breaks the friction holding the pile together. Once the bottom layers slip off the forks, the entire weight shifts completely downward, leaving little time to stop the material release. Always wrap slippery boards securely to a solid base before moving them. Push the manual lift slowly to keep full control over the weight. On a flatbed truck, a loose cylinder starts moving across the deck, and its weight quickly takes control. Blocking a freely rolling load creates an uncontrolled force that is almost impossible to manage by hand. Heavy cylindrical weights build sudden momentum once they start moving. Trying to stop that moving mass can overpower any stance and cause rapid loss of footing. Gravity immediately pulls the object toward the lower path, closing the space against the ground below. Rounded freight must be controlled before it moves, not after it breaks loose. On a bridge crossing, a truck forces past a lowered barrier, moving the barrier arm into the roadside. Security barriers are rigid arms designed to control traffic, but they can release stored energy when contacted by heavy vehicles. If a truck pushes through a gate, force transfers into the barrier arm and changes movement instantly. The pole can move across the crossing path, turning a checkpoint into a shifting obstruction. The safest position is outside the arm's travel range when traffic approaches. Mechanical gates need space on both sides, especially near roads and bridges. Stay back from checkpoints when large vehicles approach. A lowered barrier may look still, but traffic contact can turn it into an object. Inside a factory floor, a crane-lifted panel loses support after release as the vertical load begins to tip sideways. Tall panels are unstable when they rest on thin edges without bracing. While the crane is connected, the overhead rigging helps hold the load upright. But once the crane support is released, every force transfers into the base. If the bottom is not blocked or secured, the panel can tip as its center of gravity moves beyond the support line. Vertical loads need fixed bracing before the crane is detached. Secure the base, verify the lean, control, and keep the area around the panel clear until the load is fully stable. A foundation wallwork area becomes risky when a builder steps from a ladder and relies on a thin temporary frame that cannot support personal weight. Trusting temporary structural forms to hold personal weight exposes you to major loss of stability risks. These supports are designed to hold pouring materials, not to handle sudden pulling forces. Applying your weight quickly breaks the fragile connections. Once the thin metal bends, the grip completely vanishes, leaving limited room to recover before reaching the ground below. Site directors must supply dedicated scaffolding for elevated tasks. Safety auditors need to mark temporary forms as unsafe anchor points. Inside a warehouse aisle, tall storage racks lose stability, showing how quickly an unanchored structure can change the entire work area. Tall storage structures hold immense weight near their top edges. Shifting unanchored frames can destroy their fragile balance instantly. Gravity takes control, pulling the towering mass downward with rapid speed. These heavy materials accelerate quickly, creating a severe collapse path in any narrow space below. Manual force cannot hold back a falling wall of stored material. Rack stability starts at the floor. Anchor tall frames, inspect the base, and keep narrow aisles clear during movement or adjustment. The warning sign is not always noise. Sometimes it is a slight shift in a heavy structure. Along a residential delivery route, a simple reverse maneuver becomes unsafe when a commercial van moves backward through an unseen path. Closed rear cabins create large blind areas behind vans and delivery vehicles. When the backing path is occupied during a reverse maneuver, the driver can lose visual contact almost completely. Even a slow adjustment can become unsafe because the vehicle continues moving while the rear path is hidden. Movement near active delivery vehicles requires full attention to direction and visibility. Stepping behind a reversing van can remove the path from view quickly. Stay outside the rear path and confirm eye contact before crossing. At a construction site, an unstable ladder setup meets the recoil of a power nailer as the working position loses control. Tool recoil can disrupt a weak climbing position almost instantly. A ladder provides access, but it does not provide the same stable surface as a platform. When a power nailer pushes backward during use, that force travels through the stance and into the ladder. If the ladder is not secured, level, and properly positioned, the working surface can shift at the exact moment tool control is needed most. Before using powered tools at height, stabilize the access equipment. Secure the ladder, maintain balanced footing, and use a wider elevated platform when the task requires force, reach, or repeated tool operation. An indoor demolition site becomes unstable after repeated wall strikes weaken the structure and cause an uncontrolled material release. Weakening the bottom of heavy vertical structures directly exposes anyone nearby to sudden falling hazards. Removing lower supports shifts immense overhead weight quickly, turning a solid barrier into a serious material release zone. The total mass can release in a split second, leaving almost no time for anyone in the marked hazard zone to move away safely. Structural evaluators must perfectly map out safe breakpoints before any swinging starts. Hammer operators have to secure the upper sections to stop uncontrolled drops completely. Every single person nearby must honor a wide exclusion radius until the demolition is totally finished. At a crowded gas station, an SUV reverses toward an active fuel pump, and one wrong movement puts the whole area at risk. Reversing heavy vehicles into busy fueling areas can trigger an immediate chain reaction. A sudden rear contact can tear open fragile active dispensers and release a large cloud of fuel vapor. Metal scraping can create an ignition source that rapidly lights the vapor, turning the concrete area into a fast-spreading fire risk. Fueling areas demand slow movement, mirror checks, and full attention before reversing. Regard every pump as fragile equipment surrounded by ignition risk. A few extra seconds of scanning can protect the entire station from a chain reaction. At a busy fuel loading station, the transfer area changes fast when invisible vapors collect around open hatches and metal surfaces. Flammable liquids can release vapors during high-volume transfer, especially around tanks, hoses, hatches, and fittings. When ventilation is weak, those vapors can settle near equipment, where a static charge, hot surface, or small spark may trigger a vapor reaction and rapid pressure change. Safe fuel loading depends on grounding, bonding, airflow, controlled ignition sources, and a clear loading sequence. Vapors are difficult to see, so the controls must be confirmed before transfer begins. Check grounding and bonding before hatches open, keep ventilation active, remove ignition sources, and follow each step carefully without shortcuts from start to finish. On a smooth factory floor, a scaffold is pushed forward as the weight above it becomes increasingly unstable. Tall wheeled platforms possess a highly sensitive center of gravity. The higher the load sits, the easier it is for movement, braking, or floor irregularities to shift the center of gravity. A small bump under the wheel can stop the base while the upper mass continues moving forward. That difference between the base and top section creates a tipping force that can quickly overpower the platform's stability. The safer control is to lower the elevated sections before movement begins. Clear the platform, reduce height, check the floor path, and move slowly. An industrial pump room creates a hidden fall hazard when a worker mistakes flimsy warning tape for a solid handrail near an elevated edge. Mistaking warning strips for rigid fall protection directly exposes you to serious drops. These fragile bands only mark visual boundaries and possess zero structural strength. Leaning your weight against them quickly breaks the weak tension. The false security vanishes in a split second, allowing you to lose edge protection with no solid anchor left to resist the fall. Platform designers must construct permanent metal barricades along all open drops. Hazard auditors need to replace deceptive string barriers with immovable steel fences. In an industrial yard, a crane lowers a heavy load onto a truck, and one off-center move changes the vehicle's balance fast. Standing beneath suspended materials creates a closed-off load path. Vehicles require carefully centered weight to remain stable. When heavy objects land off-center, the sudden force can break the truck's equilibrium. The machine then levers over as gravity takes control in a rapid moment. The falling steel and shifting frame can close the space underneath, for the load path can be cleared, turning the area below into an unsafe position. A heavy placement must be centered, planned, and guided from outside the load path. Use tag lines, verify the balance point, and keep the truck's side clearance open. When the load is overhead, distance is the strongest protection. Inside a processing plant, a task on top of a large rotary cylinder becomes unsafe when the equipment begins moving unexpectedly. Industrial tumblers and rotary drums use spinning force to mix or move heavy materials. When access happens on or near the drum without energy isolation, the surface can restart while the work area still depends on it for support. Sudden rotation changes the cylinder from a stable-looking platform into a rolling surface, removing footing and control. The safe choice is to pause the work until power is isolated, locked, and verified unable to restart. Powered equipment needs proper energy control before access. A stopped machine is not safe until it is locked out, tested, and confirmed at zero movement. On a street in Nantou County, a dark bag is loaded into a garbage truck compactor before dry ash bursts out into the loading area. Dry powder behaves differently from ordinary solid waste. When sealed inside a bag, it can trap air and fine particles under pressure. A garbage truck compactor applies sudden force against the bag, compressing the contents against steel surfaces. If the plastic tears quickly, the trapped air pushes powder outward in a large cloud. Powdery waste should be dampened, labeled, and handled separately when possible. Unknown contents should be checked before compaction. Keeping the loading area controlled reduces sudden dust release and prevents visibility loss around active machinery. A roadside excavation zone becomes unstable beneath heavy equipment as soft soil gives way and tips an excavator toward the open trench. Traveling over loose, uneven soil directly exposes heavy machinery to sudden, unpredictable shifts. The ground easily gives way under high weight, quickly throwing the center of balance off. When the earth under one track crumbles into an open void, the entire machine tilts uncontrollably. Site planners must pack and level the soil to build strong, stable transit paths. Equipment drivers need to carefully test the ground firmness before driving near any open drop. On a busy street, a dump truck rolls forward with its bed still raised, heading straight for a low brick archway. Driving machinery with elevated sections creates a moving collision setup. Overhead, architecture relies on strict height limits. When a raised steel bed hooks solid masonry, the truck's forward momentum can tear the structure apart. The vehicle's power releases heavy debris from above, dropping rigid material into the cabin area. The truck should not move until the bed is fully lowered and locked. Drivers need a final mirror check, height awareness, and a clear overhead route before rolling. The path above matters just as much as the road ahead. On a factory floor, a mechanical clamp cycles and closes around an occupied lower work position instead of the intended load. Industrial clamps rely on tension controls and correct positioning to grip the material they are designed to handle. When clamp arms are active above a walkway, a wrong position, control error, or unexpected cycle can bring the jaws together around the wrong point. The motion may be difficult to correct because the equipment is built to hold strong materials under force. Clear separation from the gripping path is essential whenever the clamp is active. Work positions should stay outside the closing path. Keep distance, check overhead equipment, and confirm the clamp path is clear before cycling begins. On a factory floor, loose fabric moves too close to a spinning industrial roller as the machine's pull force takes over. Rotating rollers are designed to grip and feed material. Their surface friction pulls objects toward the in-running gap with continuous mechanical force. When loose fabric reaches the roller, the machine can catch it before there is time to correct the position. The roller does not need a large opening to create a hazard. A small loose edge is enough for the rotation to begin pulling material inward. The safest approach is separation from moving parts. Loose clothing, hanging fabric, lanyards, and unsecured material must stay away from rollers. Inside a packed warehouse, moving from the base of a freestanding stack quickly creates an uncontrolled collapse hazard. Extracting items from the base of towering, unbraced inventory directly exposes the entire pile to sudden failure. These massive columns rely entirely on bottom support to stay upright. Removing just one segment quickly breaks that fragile balance. The immense overhead weight moves downward immediately. This falling mass contacts neighboring piles, creating a large chain reaction that leaves almost no time to safely move away. Facility designers must install sturdy metal racks to support heavy loads independently. Lift drivers need to completely avoid pulling items from unsupported bases. Inventory checkers must immediately dismantle tall, unbraced cargo. Near a parked truck, a moving forklift enters a blind travel path where visibility and timing become critical. Heavy equipment carries large blind spots where movement in the path may remain completely hidden. Stepping suddenly around parked vehicles into active lanes creates a severe travel path conflict. The steel machine holds forward momentum and cannot stop immediately. Once the blind lane is entered, available reaction time may not be enough to clear the path safely. Visibility must be confirmed before movement crosses any active equipment route. Blind corners need pauses, eye contact, and protected walkways. No one should enter an active travel lane without confirming the equipment has stopped or the operator has full awareness. Inside an auto workshop, heat applied to an old fuel tank creates pressure inside a container that still holds vapor. Fuel tanks can hold fuel vapor long after the liquid appears gone. When heat reaches a sealed or poorly cleaned tank, the temperature inside rises and trapped vapor expands. Pressure can build quickly when there is no safe vent path. An empty-looking metal tank may still contain enough invisible vapor to create sudden pressure buildup during hot work. Old fuel containers need purging, cleaning, and gas testing before any heat is used. Inside a cable factory, material is guided toward a spinning spool as a rotating force catches loose material near the winding line. A spinning spool stores constant pulling energy while wrapping material at speed. The rotation is smooth, but the force behind it is strong and continuous. Any loose material near the winding line can become caught and drawn toward the center of rotation. Once the spool grips the material, the movement follows the machine's winding path, not the intended handling direction. Spool work requires strict clearance. Stop the machine before adjusting stuck material, keep loose items away from the winding line, and use tools or controls designed for safe feed correction. A bustling cargo facility exposes a lift hazard when a freight platform unexpectedly lowers while a loader remains near the opening. Standing inside an unsecured vertical transport exposes you to serious mechanical drops. These platforms rely entirely on holding gears to stay suspended. Tossing heavy objects creates sudden force that can break weak locks. Once the suspension fails, the floor can lower from beneath your feet. The platform can move unexpectedly and create a fall risk in a split second, leaving little time to grab a ledge. Equipment designers must install automatic brakes that lock when doors open. Site coordinators need to firmly enforce strict weight limits. At an extraction site, a worker stands on a loaded truck while an excavator swings nearby within a busy loading zone. Standing inside an active loading area turns a high ledge into an unsafe exposure point. Excavators move with heavy swing momentum, carrying tons of metal through the air. Limited visibility around the truck can leave positions on the cargo completely unseen. When a bucket sweeps across the path, its force can remove stable footing and push movement toward the edge. Loading areas must stay clear while the bucket is moving. Keep all access routes outside the swing radius, and never rely on the operator seeing every position around the truck. At a rugged construction site, an improvised elevated task turns unstable when a raised excavator bucket shifts without warning. Excavator buckets and booms rely on hydraulic controls that can move with small changes at the levers. A raised bucket may look steady, but it is not a work platform. If the boom settles, jerks, or shifts, the metal surface can lose its stable position immediately. Using moving equipment as support creates balance risk because the access point depends on machinery not designed for standing. Elevated work needs a proper platform with secure footing, guardrails, and stable support. Use scaffolding, lifts, or approved access equipment instead of suspended. Machine parts. Outside a building, a flaming pole reaches a bee nest beneath the eaves before the heated structure breaks loose overhead. Applying open flame to an overhead structure creates multiple hazards at once. Heat weakens attachment points, changes the strength of the nest material, and adds falling debris risk below the roofline. Once the support fails, gravity controls the movement. The burning material can drop directly into the area beneath the eaves, while smoke and heat reduce visibility and reaction time. Homemade burning tools are unpredictable around elevated hazards. Professional pest removal, proper access equipment, and ground-level exclusion are safer choices. Before any overhead task begins, the area below must be kept clear, and the method must avoid uncontrolled heat exposure. A busy fabrication shop becomes a fire risk area when a sudden spark reaches nearby packaging and a small ignition begins spreading through cluttered material. Working in cluttered spaces without immediate emergency tools leaves everyone unprepared for sudden fires. A small ignition easily catches onto dry cardboard, multiplying its heat in seconds. When a fire faces no rapid chemical resistance, it feeds freely on surrounding materials. The ignition can quickly outgrow basic control efforts, turning a minor event into a major thermal hazard. This rapid spread overwhelms the floor, leaving little margin to exit safely. Building planners must keep strong extinguishers near active tasks. Safety auditors need to clear dry debris away. On a busy roadway, a transport truck turns across traffic while an approaching motorcycle closes the distance toward the trailer's path. Heavy transport vehicles turning across lanes can create a sudden moving wall. A long trailer can block the path completely, leaving very little room for oncoming traffic to adjust. Motorcycles traveling fast carry extreme forward momentum. When a massive truck shifts sideways to enter a gate, it can cut off the entire road instantly. The sudden barrier reduces available reaction time and turns a clear route into a rigid traffic conflict. Industrial entrances are high conflict points where large vehicles need extra space and time. Watch for wide turns early, reduce speed before the gap closes, and never assume a clear lane will stay clear. Inside a cluttered automotive workshop, pressure builds into a serious risk when force is applied to a tire holding stored air energy. Large tire casings hold compressed air under strong internal pressure. If the casing is damaged, weakened, or overinflated, extra force can push the material beyond its safe limit. When the casing gives way, stored air vents outward with strong force and may move parts of the assembly unpredictably. Pressurized tires should be handled as stored energy equipment. Large casings need cages, distance, and controlled pressure checks before force is applied. Avoid leaning, pressing, or staying close to the pressure path during checks. Inside a busy warehouse, a reach truck travels with a raised heavy load as the machine's balance begins to shift. A reach truck is most stable when its load is low. When cargo is raised high on the mast, the machine's center of gravity moves upward. During travel, turning or uneven floor contact can create sideways momentum. If the elevated load shifts beyond the stable base, the machine can begin tipping before the movement can be corrected. Warehouse aisles make this worse because space is limited and load visibility may be reduced. The safest travel position is low and controlled. Lower the load before driving. At this crowded parking lot handling area, a manual pallet jack bumps a live forklift and sends the equipment forward, turning the workspace unpredictable. Lifting active motorized equipment with unpowered transport tools exposes the area to sudden mechanical failure. A simple physical bump can bypass delicate safety locks. This unexpected contact quickly sends massive metal frames surging forward without warning. Once the wheels catch traction, the heavy load accelerates completely out of control. Equipment drivers must firmly lock all internal brakes before any external adjustments begin. Facility planners need to strictly separate handling zones from parked vehicles. Everyone present has to maintain wide physical distance during complex transfers. Inside a warehouse, an electric pallet lifter nudges a tall stack of glass bottles, and the unstable load begins to shift. Lifting towering cargo without confirming full stability can create a sudden load collapse. High stacks rely on a steady center of gravity and a firm base. Once a lifter shifts an unbalanced bottom layer, the heavy tiers can buckle quickly. The sudden tilt breaks the delicate equilibrium that kept the stack upright. Tall freight should be secured, tested, and moved slowly from a stable base. If the stack leans, separates, or flexes, stop before adding lift force. A load that looks vertical is not always balanced. Beside a residential pool, a heavy refrigerator shifts near a narrow, wet edge, leaving little room to control the load. Bulky loads can change balance during carrying because weight may pull movement in unexpected directions. Around pools, wet borders and narrow walkways reduce traction and leave little space to recover. When the load shifts, stable footing can disappear and movement may drift toward the open water edge. Careful moving requires a dry route, teamwork, and enough space to set the appliance down if balance changes. Heavy appliances should stay away from slick borders and tight pool edges without planning. Clear a dry path before lifting. Keep large loads away from open edges. Move slowly, use enough helpers, and protect footing. At a forest road extraction site, a blocked log under pressure is cut as stored energy suddenly releases through the timber. Fallen timber can hold hidden tension and compression when it rests across uneven ground. A log may appear still, but internal force can be locked inside the bend, contact point, or trapped section. Cutting through the wood releases that stored energy. Once the cut opens, the timber can roll, spring, or shift along the easiest movement path. Before cutting loaded timber, identify the compression side, tension side, and natural movement direction. Use blocks, stable supports, and a clear escape route. The cut should be planned so released energy moves away from the work position. A home renovation work area shows the danger of unstable height setups when an extension ladder is balanced on a narrow scaffold frame. Stacking climbing tools to reach high elevations destroys your foundation. These structures require solid, flat earth to safely distribute weight. Elevating the base creates a dangerous pivot point. When you climb, gravity pulls backward against the top support. The lower platform cannot handle this strong force and quickly gives way. The setup loses stability in a split second, leaving you with no support to stop the fall. Site planners must measure target heights before starting tasks. Tool purchasers need to supply single devices long enough for the job. Every individual must plant bases on solid ground. On a factory floor, hot torch sparks land too close to a gas cylinder, creating an ignition risk in seconds. Hot tools throwing sparks can create a rapid ignition area. Tanks hold concentrated fuel that may escape through tiny valve leaks. When glowing metal meets unseen gas, a fast reaction can happen instantly. The container can push the expanding flame outward and expose the tight space around it. Heat can spread through the work area quickly, leaving nearby materials and open paths vulnerable to fire movement. Separate hot work from fuel storage before sparks begin. Move cylinders away, check valves, and scan the area for leaks or combustible materials. Inside a processing workshop, a cutting task turns unstable when a massive upright stone block loses balance during the cut. Large, upright stone pieces can look stable while holding uneven weight. When a cutting tool enters the lower section of an unbraced block, support strength can weaken quickly. Vibration from the tool may reduce balance and allow upper weight to shift outward along its movement path. Reliable cutting depends on bracing, clamps, supports, and a clear area around the direction the stone could move. Tall, heavy stone materials need secure bracing before cutting begins. An upright stone block should not depend on its own weight during tool contact. Brace the load, confirm the path is clear, then bring tools into position. Inside a busy workshop, a massive metal cylinder hangs from an overhead crane before the lifting support unexpectedly fails. A suspended load stores gravitational energy the entire time it is hanging. Lifting straps carry the weight through tension, and any weakness in the strap, sling angle, or contact point can reduce the safety margin. If the rigging fails, the load path changes instantly. The cylinder no longer follows controlled crane movement. It follows gravity into the space directly beneath the lift. Safe lifting depends on inspection and clearance. Check slings for wear, confirm the load weight, protect straps from sharp edges, and use tag lines to guide movement from outside the drop path. Inside a steel processing facility, guiding an overhead crane becomes a serious safety concern when the lifting rigging unexpectedly fails and a heavy beam moves downward. Walking underneath suspended materials exposes you to instant struck-by force when hardware fails. Hoist straps carry immense tension during transport. When weak points snap under extreme stress, gravity immediately takes full control. The solid payload drops downward with significant speed. Tool purchasers must source durable synthetic slings precisely rated for extreme industrial weights. Inspection specialists have to thoroughly examine every single cable connection before raising loads. Floor guides must use long extension poles to steer objects from safe perimeters. To keep learning from these important workplace safety lessons, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay aware, stay safe.